This is a long one, there's too many details for it to be a short one. I've copied this from the link below. I seen her case was posted last year but hasn't been shared in a while. I just came across it. It's a crazy story. In June 1989, the quiet Vancouver, British Columbia, suburb of Richmond was shocked when a body was found lying in the yard of an abandoned house. The victim was a 44-year-old nurse named Cindy James. She had been drugged and strangled, and her hands and feet had been tied behind her back. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police believed that her death was either an accident or suicide. Cindy had graduated from nursing school in 1966. She later became the administrator for a preschool for children with behavioral and emotional issues. She was married but did not have any children of her own. In July 1982, she and her husband separated. 4 months later, she began receiving mysterious and sometimes threatening phone calls. During the next 7 years, she reported nearly 100 incidents of harassment. 5 were violent physical attacks while others were whispering to silent phone calls. This got worse after she involved the police. At night, she heard prowlers. Her porch lights were smashed and her phone lines severed. According to her friend, Agnes Woodcock, she said bizarre notes began to appear on her doorstep. Someone was trying to scare her to death. She became reluctant and frightened to give details. Over time, the police began to doubt her stories. One night in January 1983, Agnes dropped by Cindy's house for a visit and knocked on the door. There was no answer, so she assumed she was taking her bath. As she investigated, she came across her outside, crouched down with a nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck. She'd gone out to the garage to get a box and someone had grabbed her from behind. All she saw were white sneakers. Cindy moved to a new house, painted her car, and changed her last name. She also hired a private investigator, Ozzy Cobbin. The police continued their investigation and questioned her several times. Ozzy later reported that she wouldn't tell them the entire story. She would be evasive, would withhold information, and simply would not act as a normal victim would act. When the police gave her a polygraph, the examiner claimed that she was withholding information. Her mother, Tilly Hack, thinks the reason for her daughter's reluctance was that her attacker had threatened her sister and family. By naming him, her family would be killed. On the night of January 30, 1984, Ozzy Cobbin heard strange sounds coming over a two-way radio he had given Cindy and went straight to her house. He went around the house and found it was locked. Looking through a window, he found her lying on the floor with a paring knife through her hand. She was taken to the hospital where she later recalled being attacked and a needle going into her arm. Police never took fingerprints from a suspect, and there was no independent corroboration. Cindy saw this person sometimes accompanied by 1 or 2 others, or sometimes she said there were 2 or 3 people, but police could never find a suspect. The threatening phone calls continued, but they were too short to trace. There were never ones when the police had 24-hour surveillance on her house for days on end with up to 14 officers, but when surveillance was off her house, another incident would happen. As police became skeptical of the harassment, her parents believed her attacker was staying away to make them suspicious of her. On December 11, 1985, she was found dazed and semi-conscious lying in a ditch 6 miles from her home. She was wearing a man's work boot and glove, and suffering from hypothermia. Cuts and bruises covered her body. A black nylon stocking had been tied tightly around her neck. She had no memory of what happened. Agnes Woodcock and her husband, Tom, stayed with her, and one night heard noises and awoke to the basement in flames and the phone dead. Tom left the residence to alert the neighbors. He saw a man at the curb and asked him to call the fire department. Instead, he simply ran off down the street. The police suspected that Cindy had staged the incident. They found no dust or fingerprints disturbed on the outside of the windowsill. The fire was set inside the home. In order to set it, it was thought, the perpetrator would have needed to climb through this specific window. It was also considered odd that Cindy still freely walked her dog during the attacks. Her doctor committed her to a local psychiatric ward, believing she was becoming suicidal. 10 weeks later, she left the hospital. Her father, Otto Hack, said that she finally admitted to her family and friends that she knew more than she was saying and would go after her perpetrator herself. On May 25, 1989, 6 years and 7 months after the first threatening phone call, Cindy disappeared. On the same day, her car was found in a neighborhood parking lot. Inside were groceries and a wrapped gift. There was blood on the driver's side door and items from her wallet were under the car. 2 weeks later, her body was found at the abandoned house. It looked like she had been brutally murdered. Her hands and feet were bound together behind her back. A black nylon stocking was tied tightly around her neck. Yet, an autopsy revealed that she died from an overdose of morphine and other drugs. Police concluded that she had committed suicide. Ozzy didn't believe she would have been able to stage the scene, but others believed it was possible. In Vancouver, the coroner ruled that her death was not suicide, an accident, or a murder. They determined that she died of an unknown event. Cindy's parents never doubted that their daughter was murdered. Otto believed the police did not investigate the possibility of homicide or of somebody murdering her, instead zeroing in on trying to prove that she committed suicide. They believe someone in Vancouver is getting away with murder.
I know this case often gets written off as her doing it herself/mental illness, and that may very well be the case, but I definitely think some of the things that prove she was lying actually prove nothing at all, like police claiming she wasn't acting how a victim should and that she was holding back according to a lie detector test. Both of those are nonsense. Victims don't need to act a certain way. This thinking is why people have gotten blamed in the past for crimes they didn't commit. And lie detector tests are junk science.
I'm interested to know more about the man that was allegedly spoken to and ran away the night of the fire. I think if she did do this, then she was obviously very ill, but if she wasn't, then the person who did definitely tried to gaslight her and successfully tricked everyone else into thinking she was being crazy, which I might add, has happened in many abusive relationships, so I wouldn't put it past a stalker, especially if it was a vendetta by a previous lover/friend, to do the same.
Paranoid schizophrenia, when your county's officers spends over $1 million and exhausted their resource to find this phantom stalker to no avail, when the second they take down their surveillance then the stalker strikes, when the phone call sounds like a middle-aged woman disguising her voice, when all of this is happening to the victim and she thinks it's a good idea to walk her dog 3 a.m. in the morning. I am almost certain we're working with someone, without a full deck of cards.
Also in recent years, there's a phenomenon happening called gang stalking, which mimics this exact behavior. Vice did a good two-piece on this subject. More than 10,000 people worldwide claim they're the victims of a vast organized surveillance effort designed to ruin their lives, a phenomenon known as gang stalking. Mental health experts see gang stalking as a symptom of paranoia, but the self-identified victims who insist what they're experiencing is real have come together online and in support groups to share their stories. Vice met up with a handful of Americans who claim their lives have been derailed by gang stalking to understand what serious consequences the phenomenon presents.
Then we hear from Dr. Josh Basil, one of many physicians who believes the victims of gang stalking are experiencing dangerous delusions that could be treated by mental health professionals.
Just supposing that her story is true, then this stalker had multiple opportunities over many years to kill her if that's what he wanted. He caught her alone outside, broke into her house, had her at his mercy with knives and stockings, yet seemed to get only halfway through the job before just walking away and leaving her there. Unless he was an absolute psychotic sadist who wanted her to endlessly suffer, it seems very odd that he had all these simple chances to go ahead and kill her, but never did.
Why did she and her husband separate, but never divorce? They separated in '82, and she died in '89. Was there contention over division of assets? Was one of them not willing to let go? Or was their situation working for them, and they just no reason to go through with it? Working for them.
So, what's your theory on what happened? Post it in the comments below. Thank you for listening. You can find the original post in r/unresolved mysteries through the link in the description box below. I like being able to listen to posts when I'm busy doing something else and can't read them. So I made this video for anyone who wants to listen to their Reddit posts. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and don't forget to hit the subscribe button below to get more puzzling mysteries.